Well, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this edition of the 700 Club. Iran's Islamic regime is the world's leading sponsor of terror. Now it's pursuing nuclear weapons, and it threatens to destroy the state of Israel.
The rogue nation's ambitions began 40 years ago when a radical Muslim cleric came to power. John Wagee takes us back to the start of Iran's Islamic Revolution and shows us the threat it poses today.
In 1979, the world was introduced to the menacing glare of the Ayatollah Khomeini. His Iranian revolution ousted the Shah of Iran, a U.S. ally, and put its mark on American history with a hostage crisis that lasted more than a year. Its leaders began to purge the country of Western influence and set Iran on a path of expansion and Islamist terror. During the revolution, the U.S. was dubbed the Great Satan by the ruling mullahs. Still, most of their hatred was reserved for the country they called the Little Satan, Israel. For 4 decades, they have vowed to wipe it off the map. The show of force continued this month as Iran paraded its missiles in Tehran.
I think a clash is inevitable.
Middle East expert Michael Widlansky says according to Israeli military sources, Iran has armed Hezbollah in Lebanon with enough missiles to bombard all of Israel for weeks.
Lebanon itself is so well armed with Hezbollah missiles and rockets that Israel could face every day not 10 rockets, not 100 rockets, but 2,500 rocket attacks every day over a period of 3 weeks.
And that doesn't take into account Iran's nuclear program. In last year's UN address, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu exposed a secret nuclear site with 300 tons of nuclear material. While Widlansky warns Israel can take care of itself, he worries if the mullahs aren't stopped, their grand design could swallow up the region.
The Iranians want Shia Islam to be the face of Islam. That means they want to go after Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Kuwait. They want to go after all their neighbors and project their force all the way to the Mediterranean and to the Atlantic. This is not just a religious calling. This is very serious power politics strategy playing.
John Wagee, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Well, joining us now is Jonathan Schanzer. He's the Senior Vice President of the Foundation for Defensive Democracy. He's an expert on the policies of the Middle East. And Jonathan, welcome. Glad to see you.
Thank you very much.
What is Iran trying to do?
Well, Iran's got a couple of different objectives here in the Middle East.
Right.
One is to kick the United States out, and it's for that reason that they were laying mines and attacking American soldiers in Iraq and Afghanistan. That's a big part of what they're trying to do. They also have the goal of destroying Israel, which we just heard about. They have roughly 150,000 rockets. They've been digging tunnels under the ground through Lebanon and working with Hezbollah to achieve those aims. And then there's the broader aim also of hegemony across the Middle East. Shia Islam is roughly 20% of the faith, but they would like to be the dominant force in the Middle East. So they're trying to stretch their power from Iran all the way through Iraq and Syria to the Mediterranean.
Is there a possibility of a preemptive strike from Israel against them? I mean, sooner or later, you know, they can't be allowed to have a nuclear weapon. What's Israel going to do?
Well, Israel continues to strike tactically at Iran's weapons in places like Syria. They've actually struck Iranian assets more than 200 times over the last year or so, and that's pretty impressive. There is the broader question that you raise of the nuclear program. Of course, we know that the Israelis went into Tehran and stole thousands and thousands of documents from a warehouse, exposing a lot of Iran's nuclear secrets. But I think the Israelis have been reticent to launch a broader war now. That doesn't mean they won't have to do it at some point if they see the imperative.
How about the nuclear threat? Is Iran close to getting a bomb, do you think?
Well, the documents are interesting, the documents that the Israelis stole. What it actually shows is that the Iranians did put a pause on their nuclear program, but that they were a lot closer to getting those nukes than people realized before that deal was signed in 2015. The problem is that if we allow Iran to keep going at its current pace, they could probably develop a nuclear weapon and the means to deliver those weapons in roughly a year or two. And that is not something that the Israelis are willing to countenance.
Well, I understand the vice president was in Europe trying to get some European allies to come with us against Iran, and he wasn't successful. The Europeans like to trade with the Iranians.
Well, the Europeans were part of that P5+1 process that led to the 2015 nuclear deal. They saw it as a massive achievement. And they want to try to preserve it, I think, because probably they're afraid of Iran. They're afraid of what Iran could do in Europe. So they're going to continue to try to trade. They actually have something called a special purpose vehicle to help evade U.S. sanctions, which we find to be incredibly unhelpful, as we all know. But really, I think the question is, can we bring the Europeans closer to us in terms of a longer-term deal with the Iranians, something that deals with the question of terrorism, that deals with the question of cyber activity, human rights violations, and, of course, nuclear. Right now, we're very far apart. The hope is that we can bridge that gap. Warsaw was a first step.
We're in touch with a lot of the Iranian people, and they don't like the mullahs. They don't like that theocracy that controls their country, and they want to be free. What can be done to, to encourage those people?
Well, we had a moment in 2009. It was called the Green Revolution, where hundreds of thousands of Iranians came out into the streets. This was the best opportunity that I have seen to challenge the Iranian regime, and it was remarkable. The Obama administration elected to not take advantage of this, to not encourage these people, and in the end, the regime cracked down on the protesters. We saw murders and rapes in the streets, people being beaten up, people still in jail from 10 years ago. So the hope is that somehow the Iranian people begin to feel emboldened again. But they need to know that the United States is on their side. And I think that up until recently, they didn't really believe that was so.
Well, Jonathan, thank you very much. And do you think, they've got missiles capable of hitting not only Israel, but all of Europe. If they have any kind of nuclear bomb, they can threaten the capitals of Europe. So it's an existential threat for everybody, right?
It sure is. And when we think about what we're doing right now, we just had a long campaign against the Islamic State. And I think we're now looking at a shift toward the Islamic Republic, that this was the country we should have been thinking about all along the way.
Sure. Well, thanks for being with us, and thanks for your insights.
Thank you.
Well, in other news, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu faces a threat from rival political parties. And one of the leading candidates is a good friend of mine. He's a former head of the IDF, Benny Gantz. He and I were together up in the Golan some time ago. We traveled around together and had a good time together. And he is emerging as probably the leading candidate to challenge Netanyahu for the prime ministership of Israel. John Jessup has more.
Thanks, Pat. The two top centrist candidates in Israel will work together in April's election to defeat Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Retired military chief of staff Benny Gantz, as you just heard Pat saying, is joining forces with former finance minister Yair Lapid. Polls have shown if the two come together, they could mount a serious threat to Netanyahu's re-election chances. Netanyahu's Likud party struck back, calling his opponents a, quote, left-wing government backed by the Arab parties. Well, Coast Guard Lieutenant Christopher Paul Hassan appears in federal court today on several charges for gun and drug offenses. Federal agents found 15 firearms and over 1,000 rounds of ammunition inside his Silver Spring, Maryland apartment just outside of Washington. Prosecutors say he calls himself a white nationalist who wanted to, quote, establish a white homeland. He reportedly had a hit list of liberal politicians and media personalities. Prosecutors say they also found an email draft where he said he was dreaming of a way to kill almost every last person on Earth. Well, actor Jussie Smollett turned himself in to the Chicago police this morning. He's facing a felony charge of filing a false police report when he claimed he was attacked in downtown Chicago in January. Smollett told police two men poured bleach on him while yelling racist and homophobic slurs. He says they also yelled, "This is MAGA country." Those men are now cooperating with police, saying Smollett orchestrated the whole thing. New surveillance video shows them buying a red hat and ski masks, both items used in the alleged attack. In the beginning, many were quick to believe the story and offer support, including Senator Kamala Harris, who called the attack a modern-day lynching. Senator Cory Booker described it similarly. Comedian Trevor Noah, though, host of The Daily Show on Comedy Central, was one of the few to question the story.
We live in a world where people are too enthusiastic at jumping at stories that confirm their biases, and instead of just pausing and going, what do I make of the story?
Smollett says he's the victim and his legal team intends to mount an aggressive defense. Smollett could face up to 3 years, Pat, in prison if he's convicted.
No, I think it's an outrage that people have jumped immediately without any evidence to say, look, this is a racist attack, and isn't that horrible? The whole thing was a put-up job. He was starting to lose his parts on that show Empire, and he decided this was a way to get back in the good graces of Fox. Well, he's going to lose his place on Empire, and I think he's going to wind up for several years in jail, and I think it'd be very appropriate. This is a terrible thing to do, and the fact that all those potential presidential candidates immediately jumped to his defense without hearing the full story, that's the scandal. Well, John, what else do you have?
Pat, few might know it, but Christians are making a difference in Hollywood. The annual Movie Guide Awards celebrate faith and family-friendly films. Ephraim Graham, host of CBN's entertainment program Studio 5, was there when the stars came out, getting exclusive interviews, including Oscar winner Jon Voight.
It's a star-studded evening here in Hollywood, and Studio 5 is on the red carpet with the stars, attending the 27th Annual Movie Guide Awards. Like legendary actor Jon Voight.
What makes you come out to an event like the Movie Guide Awards? What is it pulls you here?
Well, I just so appreciate what these guys are doing. You know, the movies that they're making, the high purpose of the movies.
It's easy to snap a few shots of some very familiar faces at this annual celebration of uplifting entertainment. Madeline Carroll, who starred in the film I Can Only Imagine, is here to present an award.
How do you feel about the success of I Can Only Imagine?
It's unbelievable. It's like you can't even really put it into words because it literally just was God. He just had his way and it just went and went and went, and I did not expect it to do as well as it did. I thought it was special, obviously, to me, you know, and my personal journey with the movie. But did I think that it was going to resonate as much as it did with people? I didn't, honestly, I didn't think so.
Take these broken wings and learn to fly.
Voice contestant Spencer Baker is here to perform on the Movie Guide Awards stage.
I feel like I've been listening to your voice for a long time, since you were a kid.
14 years. Yeah, well, it's been a long journey for sure. I took the evolution from gospel music into country music, but never shifted the faith aspect of my life. So I'm very excited to be a part of an event like this, where that is celebrated.
Up for the night's highest honor, the Epiphany Prize, are Unbroken, Path to Redemption, The Grinch, and Paul, the Apostle of Christ.
And you know, before the Movie Guide Awards goes on the Hallmark Channel, you may want to watch these movies and pick out your winner and maybe pray that it will win at the Movie Guide Awards.
Ephraim Graham, CBN News, Los Angeles.
Thanks, Ephraim. And you can watch the Movie Guides Award show. It airs Monday, February 25th at 10 p.m. Eastern on the Hallmark Channel. Pat, looks like an exciting show.
Well, I appreciate it. They gave me a couple of years ago a Lifetime Achievement Award, and I appreciate it very much. I was out there for that thing, but Ted Baer does a terrific job.
Sure does, and has for a long time.
Well, he's infiltrated, if I could use that term, Hollywood, and because of his reviews and what he has to say, he's changed and shifted the focus of Hollywood dramatically. And I mean, my hat's off to Ted Baer and the great work they're doing with that.
Absolutely. Hear, hear.
What does he call it? Movie Guide Award and whatever. Okay.